Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Yuri Kruman joining us. Yuri, welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me, Michael. It's great to speak with you.
So you've worked with Goldman Sachs, Deloitte, IBM, Pfizer, Adobe, Stanford, a whole bunch of other well-known organizations, focusing on employee engagement and getting employees to thrive. Before we talk about how you built up such a high caliber client roster, I want you to take us back to the early days. What were you doing before you got into the world of consulting and coaching?
Oh, that was a long time ago, it seems like, even though it wasn't in years, but in lifetimes ago. Well, before I got into consulting, I actually was in law. I finished law school in 2009, which was just about the worst time to finish law school. I quickly realized that I don't really want to work in law. It's ironically not my thing. I love the skill set. It's very useful, but there were also no jobs and didn't seem to be very good at passing the bar exam. So the situation was very fluid, and I just realized, look, I had some experience interning in a hedge fund, and maybe finance was my ticket. So I got into a project at Fortress Investment Group. I was there for a few months. It was kind of a legal/compliance situation. I learned a lot about how credit works, all that good stuff. And then the project ended and had a lull. Then I got into, I believe it was Brown Brothers Harriman. So that's kind of a mid-tier bank. And there I was doing stuff around credit risk and compliance, that sort of stuff. And then the next gig, again, after a while, was at Bank of America. And that's also credit risk. I mean, you see a theme. Basically, at that point, there wasn't any kind of unitary thing called consulting. It was kind of like you're doing a project or you're freelancing, and then there's consulting for a large consulting firm. And I think over the last probably about 10 years, I'm not sure there's much of a difference in any practical sense between the two. So it's really all based on how are you sourcing those projects? How are you finding the clients? Are they finding you as an intermediary?
So at that stage, when you were going, the law thing didn't work out, then you did a project here, you did a project there. Was your mindset already, I've now made the leap to building a business and being kind of an independent consultant, or were you still in job/employee mode?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly frank, I was very much in job/employee mode. I really wasn't thinking about, okay, how do I build a business? I'd had a couple business ideas here and there, but nothing ever really stuck. And the ideas were not really around consulting. So it took me a good long time to really wrap my mind around, okay, I'm really doing this for myself because this is what I want to do. And this is the business that I want to build.
And what did that transition look like when you actually decided, okay, I'm going to get into consulting. I'm going to build a business here. I'm going to move away from just trying to find the next job and kind of be an employee. What was that transition like for you?
Sure. So there was a point where I left the corporate world and went into startups. I went into health tech. Kind of being in the startup context made more sense to me. It was more my speed. Things seemed to be more dynamic. There was a lot more to learn per unit time. So for me, it was like, oh, awesome. I got into tech, right? I talked my way into this awesome startup. Ironically, actually, again, I had a lull between Bank of America and the next gig, and I think something like 7 months. And things are really tight. I have $250,000 in law school loans and just got married and all that good stuff and basically expecting a kid. Actually, no, I think I already had the kid. We had our first when I was at Bank of America. And then, I'm basically doing mommy and me, but it's daddy and me.
Right.
So I'm doing that for a few months. And then I talked my way into a consulting firm. That was actually the first time I was in a real consulting firm. And basically the HR guy who was an entrepreneur himself, Afghani guy, is a good friend of mine. He took a chance on me. He basically brought me in. I aced the interview. I did the case interview as well, having never done it. So basically the theme was always, I'm going into something I don't really know what I'm doing there, but I talk my way into it. So I got into this consulting firm. I'm there for a month. This project goes really, really well. It's a large asset manager. And here I am. I get a conversation. I get a call from the head of this startup with whom I'd been speaking for about 18 months. He's like, hey, come for lunch. So I go for lunch with him, and he's like, look, we're building this great stuff. I know that you mentioned you want to do this thing. I kind of wanted to do product management. Basically, he says, I need you to come work with me. I think this would be a great fit. I love the way you see the world. I think it's very similar to mine, but I need help in finance and operations. And I was like, I love this company. I love what you guys are building there. This is a benefit SaaS company. Between other things, while I was at Brown Brothers, Harriman, I was working on the side on a startup idea. It was called More Spinach Inc., basically trying to build what became Oscar Health without any funds. So that went into researching health tech. And again, kind of you see this back and forth zigzagging. So while I'm in this consulting firm, which is big data in healthcare, I go for this lunch and I get into the company. The guy makes an offer right on the spot. He's like, look, come for the company retreat tomorrow morning in Boston. I was like, this is nuts. This is just totally crazy. And then I told him, okay, make this permanent. Like, don't just make this another gig. I want this to be permanent. I'm already in a good place. I did it on the spot. I was there the next morning and I quit basically the next day. And I started work at this startup the next Monday. It was totally crazy. Never did finance and operations. I walk in the door. My colleague on paper, my equal, a guy with an MBA in finance. So I began a really crazy journey. I don't remember exactly how many months, 7 or 8, I think, where I was working alongside him, and the learning curve is completely insane. And managing a financial model, I'm negotiating with things like rent.
And then let me just jump in for a moment here. So I see the path you've taken to get into the startup. At what point did you exit the startup? When did you actually really get into building your consulting business? What did that transition look like?
Okay, so basically after that startup, I went into a different one. Just very briefly, I did product management there. Again, not a great fit. I went into a third startup where I was doing special projects, which included HR. Long story short, after that third one didn't work out for various reasons, I decided, you know what, I'm going to stay at home. We just had our second kid then. And my wife and I decided, look, I seem to be pretty good at coaching people. I was just doing that on the side. So why not make that a business? And that's when I really started to make Master the Talk Consulting into something more than just a hobby. It became a full-time thing. And about 2 months into that, unfortunately, our daughter was diagnosed with cancer. So I really had to make it work. Like basically between hospital visits and again, with the debt and everything else, living in New York, now with 2 kids, this really has to stick. That's when things became really clear. This is my thing. I'm really good at it. I'm delivering a lot of value. And from that, from the coaching came, wait a minute, after I'd done enough coaching, helped enough mid-career millennials to switch careers, change jobs, really find their thing, find their dream career. I realized, look, the reason these people are leaving is because they're not fulfilled. They're not aligned to mission, vision, values for the company where they're working. And I can turn around that data set, which I gained from coaching, and go to those same companies and say, hey, if you want to keep your best people, here is what you need to do. That's when this became a consulting firm, not just a coaching.
Got it. How's your daughter today?
Thanks for asking. Thank God she's much better. We're well past all those dark days.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I have 2 daughters myself. And yeah, I mean, the moment I heard that, my heart just feeling a different sensation. So I'm really glad to hear that. Okay, so now we're up to speed into the transition into consulting. Talk to me now about how you actually built your business. The first few clients, what did that look like? What were you actually doing to go out and get your first few clients once you actually launched kind of officially your own consulting business?
It was a mix of people coming to me just based on LinkedIn profile, and I've always done my own PR. One thing I've been always good at is telling my own story once I got it straight.
What do you mean? Like when you say doing your own PR, specifically, what did that look like?
Practice, once I really started doing the coaching part, for example, I got into a platform called The Muse. It's whatever. The point is it's kind of like helping millennials build their careers. I realized, okay, I can get on their newsletter. And I talked to a guy in synagogue and he said, hey, listen, you like writing. I have a friend who works for Money Magazine. Like, oh, well, can you connect me? So he connected me. I pitched him a story. And next thing I know, it's on the front page of their website. And it kind of got me the taste of, okay, I think there's something very valuable in my story for other people. I can help others tell their story. So I started doing my own PR. I started writing on Quora, for example. That got picked up by BBC, PBS, etc. I started getting outreach from other publications, became a contributor. I got into the Forbes Coaches Council, which made me a Forbes contributor. I had a coach help me to get an entrepreneur, and et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of started building this larger and larger stable of pieces and features, and eventually kind of learn how to play the PR game.
How hard was that for you to get your work, your writing, your ideas into those publications? Because for everyone listening who hasn't had that experience, I've had my fair share of it as well. But from your perspective, was that really challenging to get into those publications? Or how do you describe that experience and how much kind of work it took?
I'm going to just speak very frankly, because I think most people have a bit of misunderstanding of how things work with PR. So PR can be either a very dirty game or it can be a very interesting game. And the truth always is somewhere in between. So the way things often work, unfortunately, is there's a lot of pay for play, right? A lot of this has been swept out in the last maybe year or two. Huffington Post closed down its contributors platform. Forbes, Entrepreneur, a lot of these other publications have also tried to stem the tide of that because you have a lot of very unethical things going on. So bottom line is there are official ways to get in, meaning you pitch people. Maybe you have a group of contributors in a Facebook group that where you can pitch as a contributor somewhere else. So there's a quid pro quo. Sometimes a contributor might have an arrangement with a PR firm where, let's say, the contributor publishes a piece for another client of the PR firm, and the PR firm returns the favor by publishing a piece.
Right. So you're saying there's a lot of different ways to potentially end up, but if you were to take a straight line approach or just one that's above board, what does that look like? Just very briefly in summary, because there's a lot I want to cover with you here. But also, was that challenging for you? Like you've mentioned all these different publications that you got onto. Was that hard for you, or did you, once you figured it out, it was pretty straightforward?
It's never quite completely straightforward, but for me, the main part was not getting featured on money.com. It was very much joining the Forbes Coaches Council, because the whole equation there was once you're in, you're a Forbes contributor. So even though that part of their website doesn't get that much play, you can honestly say, I'm a Forbes contributor. And once you're into Forbes, then you can publish, you can get your thought leadership out there, and then leverage that to get into places like Entrepreneur, right? There's a process where you pitch the online contributions editor, and there's a certain format. So I kind of learned that. I took a course by someone who coaches people to get on there, and he's helped hundreds of people get on these different platforms.
Got it. Okay.
There's a way to do it. There's a formula. You want to use something that's been done successfully by others. So whether that's a script, a template, etc., there's always a way to learn from others that have done it. And that's
for sure. Right. Yeah, I mean, coaching, you look at anyone at high levels of performance and success, right? They're always getting coached or mentored by someone else. How beneficial would you say writing has been for you? Like to get published on those different platforms, has that been a big source of new business for you? Or is it just more about building your brand? What would you say in terms of like direct correlation to building your business and getting clients?
I'm going to be, again, very blunt. It's been a huge deal. For me, that happens to be a strong suit. That's something I'm pretty good at. But also once you get the formula, you start realizing, okay, well, I'm positioning myself as a thought leader, right? Let's say I want to publish a book. So a book I just put out in March took me about a year all in between pitching a proposal to somebody who was looking for new ideas, right? So there's...
You mean like a trade publisher?
Yeah, I guess kind of like a trade publisher, something called Business Expert Press, by the way, for those out there that are looking to do that. They're always looking for proposals. Mm-hmm. So there was a guy I was connected to on LinkedIn, and he reached out. He said, hey, listen, you have a great background. Do you want to pitch this public publisher? So I ended up doing that. It got approved. And then I wrote it maybe over the course of 2 to 3 months of late nights. And then the book came out in March. And that's become my kind of business card, for lack of a...
Right. But are you seeing that by getting published on Forbes or putting stuff out through in the past through Money or Entrepreneur or any of the other places that you've kind of been on, do you see direct leads and people reaching out to you because of those articles?
Yeah, I would say that I've definitely seen a decent amount of traffic. Like, for example, I have a client now that found me directly through those publications.
Got it. Okay. What else are you doing? Like, what else is working for you right now to get clients and help you to build your pipeline? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Well, another piece is exactly what we're doing here is podcasting, right? It's not doing my own podcast because for the time being, that's not something I have enough bandwidth for, but it's going on as many podcasts as I possibly can that relate to my ideal client audience. For example, I was on Wharton Business Radio last year. I just went on something called Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. So bottom line is you want to start thinking about how to access your ideal audience. So if you want to, let's say, consult for the Fortune 500, you look at what are the top shows where Fortune 500 leaders are listening. Mm-hmm. So that's leadership and loyalty, for example. If you're looking for fast growth startups, for example, that's a bunch of others, right? So you want to first really figure out, instead of just spray and pray and, okay, I got onto this show or that show, you really want to think about where are those people making decisions about talking to me and hiring me? Where are they hanging around? What are they listening to?
Yeah, that's a really important point, right? Not just even for podcasts, but for any kind of marketing or advertising, right? Always getting very clear on who your ideal client is and ensuring that you're showing up where they are rather than just putting stuff out there and hoping that somehow they find it.
Exactly. And I would say definitely the biggest way that I've gotten leads is just by having conversations in person. I'm someone who's been in the startup world for quite a while, and say I meet up with old classmates from law school. I just had this conversation a few weeks ago. Just met a classmate I haven't seen in 10 years on the playground. She's playing with her kid. I'm playing with my kid. Hey, what are you up to? So she's in a real estate firm, right? And they have HR issues. As soon as she heard that, what are you up to now? I do HR consulting. Right away, somebody hears that, especially an entrepreneur, someone in a small company, right away they start complaining about their people. Oh my God, they don't get it. They're terrible. They're leaving too soon. So for me, it's almost an instant trigger. I say HR consulting and they start complaining. And then I'm in a great place to say, hey, listen, I can help you with that. And then I send a proposal and we have a further conversation.
Talk to me a little bit about that process. So when you meet someone and you say, I'm in HR consulting, that gets their attention. They tell you everything wrong with their people and the issues that they're facing. Are you just going directly and saying, hey, I can help you with that? Or how do you approach it? Because sometimes people wonder, like, should I be very direct? And is it too salesy? What's been your experience? What's kind of the best practice that works for you?
I'll give you an example. I think this is a very valid one. I was going with my kids and wife to a chocolate factory. I know this sounds a little Willy Wonka-esque, but it's true.
All good, yeah.
In Red Hook, there's this really awesome French company that makes like chocolate and biscuits and all this stuff. And we love this company. We've been going to I think it's every first Thursday of the month. Mm-hmm. They open up their factory and they basically do a free tasting and they show how their stuff is done. So at one of these tastings, you go with their girls, the CEO of the American part of the company is like giving a presentation on the brand and he's trying to figure out, okay, what do customers think about our rebranding? We're sitting there and, like my wife and I, we always kind of shoot the breeze about different business ideas and like what is working here, what's not working there. I'm listening to this and I'm like, this is awesome. I love what you've built. I love your products. Then I'm like, what the hell? Why not just ask? Like, what's your HR situation? He's like, I don't have a situation. It's a very dynamic process. I'm like, we really should talk. This is my thing. I built a relationship. I said, look, we love your stuff. What can we do to help? And that naturally led to a conversation outside of that evening because I didn't want to rain on this parade. We went for coffee and he really asked me, what do you do? How do you do it? What's your story? What's your special sauce? And I said, look, here's the deal. Here's what I do. I help fast growth startups with their HR strategy and organizational development. I help build the on-ramp for fast growth startups to hire an HR director. But before they do, they need to set up not just systems, they need to get their people really buying into this digital transformation. And this particular subject, something like 4/5 of them just don't work. They don't stick because people don't really understand what's the point of all these systems, right? Nobody explains to them. They're just forced to use Slack or this or that, this performance system. So that's my particular special sauce that I worked out, so to speak, right? I come from the executive coaching world and I help people to understand how they're aligned and if they're not completely aligned to help them get there.
Really what I'm hearing is your approach is you're building a relationship, you're focusing on praising people or kind of starting off with building a bit of rapport. And then if you identify that you might be able to help them, you're not shy on letting them know that you can help them or at least that you should explore that together. Is that correct?
Yeah. It comes down to a very simple thing. And you can take a course in business school on this. You can learn it organically. There's a lot of value in just building a relationship. But how do you do it? Right. You can't go and say, okay, I want to build a relationship with someone whose values don't align with mine, or who's selling a product I could not possibly care any less about, right? It has to be organic. So I'll give you an example. One client I have there in the home health business, right? And it's about the last business that I would think I would want to work with. But these guys reached out to me. They're millennials. They happen to be from the same background as myself. And usually I'm like, okay, people from my background don't think about HR. They're like, that's the last thing they think about. But these guys specifically have built something special, maybe because they're millennials, maybe they're more American than Russian or whatever. But they already built something awesome. It's growing very quickly. They don't have a way to formalize the structure, right? It's growing too quickly. So they need their people aligned. They need their people to really understand what they're doing here. What are we building? Why do we need to upscale and up-level our organization and our processes and our people? We want our people, yes, to be more productive and yes, to do better work.
So speaking of that, you're in a space I think a lot of people find interesting and somewhat challenging when it comes to pricing. How do you go about pricing your services? What kind of structures are you using for that?
Mm-hmm. So, of course, you have kind of traditional proposals that you can find templates for and all of that. For me, it was just sort of, very frankly, having the chutzpah to just say, okay, I know that I'm delivering value massively in excess of what I'm charging. Number one, you have to just know that, and you have to build everything around that idea, because otherwise you're either going to undercharge. And when you undercharge, often people kind of wonder, like, why is this cheap, right? They also don't buy into it. And there's also psychological effect that if I'm paying a lot of money, that this is premium.
Right.
You have to build a premium brand.
And how are you valuing, or how are you kind of approaching that value? Because I think some people find it challenging when their work doesn't create a clear, tangible ROI, right? An outcome like $1 increase in sales. Your work is employee retention, development, HR strategy. Some people might consider that a little bit more on the soft side. So in your conversations with clients, do you really dig into kind of a value-focused conversation around what the impact is going to be for their organization in dollars and cents? Or how do you approach that kind of value and ROI type of conversation?
So it's a great question. The only way this can really work, I mean, and you're dealing with people that are sophisticated about money, especially, right? Decision makers that are either CEO, COO, CFO. We're not really dealing with HR person because usually there isn't one. But even if there is, that's not the decision maker. So in very plain dollars and cents, this has to make sense. So the way to approach this in my case is say, okay, well, if you want to keep, let's say 30% more of your workforce, let's say you have 100 people, so in the next year, 30 of them will leave and I'm helping you keep those 30. Let's say the cost of losing someone and then replacing them is about 1.5 times the salary. So this many people times 1.5 times their salary compared to the other scenario is this. This is the amount of money that I'm saving. Right. Number one. Number two, if you're talking about ramp up from 0 to 60, so to speak, for new employees, if that's 6 months or 12 months, well, guess what? Then you're losing the best productivity from those people that just left. So this kind of added a compounded cost in time and money, which is very concrete and very specific. And just purely from that, because again, you can go in and say, okay, my coaching is the greatest thing since sliced bread. How do you measure that? Right. So for me, going back to the coaching example, right, in that case, it's even more iffy. So how did I price things in the coaching realm? I say, look, I guarantee you results. If for you, it means that you get a job that is great alignment for you. You're happy to come into work. You're going to do your life's best work. But I'm also going to help you negotiate a 20% higher salary. Let's say you're making 150 now in your bank job, and I'm going to help you to make 180. So guess what? If you're going to make 30,000 more per year, even just for the 1 year that I'm helping you to make more, and of course, it's more than that over the lifetime of your career.
Sure.
But let's say 30K and I'm charging you 5 or 10, that's a pretty massive ROI. And people, it just clicks like, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. I think those are really good examples. I'm glad that you're sharing them. So thank you. How have you been approaching managing the growth of your business with capacity and scaling profitably? I mean, you're clearly very active in putting out content and writing and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. You're working with different clients. You have a family, right? There's a lot going on for you. So what have you found is the most effective approach to ensuring that you're delivering results for clients and doing great work, but at the same time, building your business? Put another way, how are you structuring your day and your week to ensure that your business continues to grow?
Excellent question. I appreciate that you asked it. I think in very banal terms, everything starts with time management, right? And you have to get extremely good at knowing where you add massive value with relatively little input. And this is going back to this concept of zone of genius. So you have to ask yourself 3 questions. What am I really, really good at? What do I really enjoy doing? And where do I add massive value? So where those 3 coincide, that's what you should be spending most of your time on, number 1. Number 2, what you should be doing most of in your projects with clients, right? So if that's, let's say, delivering the employee handbook, amazing, right? You know that that's something you should be focused on. If it's onboarding, maybe something you're not as good at, maybe you're not as good at producing content, well, outsource it. So a client pays you up front, maybe, I don't know, half, 2/3, whatever your arrangement is. And I'm pretty ruthless in that regard because I want to work with the best people that are the most serious. So, I charge a very large chunk up front. You take whatever it is that you get paid up front, you invest it in maybe PR, maybe it's in creating a podcast, maybe in something else, right? But you start thinking about, if I'm not as good at this, whom can I hire to do this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't need to go and learn every single thing about podcasting. I don't need to learn every single thing about getting into Forbes or Entrepreneur. I can find people that can get me in there while I'm doing this, right? Or maybe you hire someone from a platform, BTG or any of these others, right? You can always hire someone to help you to be your number 2 in command on any particular project. And you can budget what you're charging per hour versus what you're paying that person or per day.
Yeah, I think that's so important because a lot of people look and say, yeah, I don't want to spend $30 an hour, $20 an hour, $50 an hour, whatever it is to hire someone. But what they're not looking at when they think that way is the actual cost to them. It's not the cost of the $30 or $50 an hour. It's that you're losing money because even hopefully you're not charging hourly fees, but just looking at what your value is worth per hour, your value is going to be $200 to $500, $1,000 an hour. And so if you're doing $50 an hour work yourself, it means you're losing the difference what you could be earning. And so it's actually in your best interest to invest as much as you can of those and delegate those lower value tasks because then you're freed up to spend more time on your most valuable areas of work as you're talking about.
Exactly. And again, if you're going into this with the understanding that you're charging a lot of money because your brand is premium, because you're delivering massively more value than what you're charging for, then you have to go to other service providers, vendors, etc., who are going to cost you a hell of a lot less, especially when you're not good at it and you're going to spend a lot of time doing something you're not great at.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's such an important point when it comes to growth and scale. You don't have to always bring in full-time employees or even part-time. You can build with outsourced talent contractors, or you might go the full-time or part-time route. But the most important thing is that you're delegating, not spending your time trying to do everything because you just can't grow that way. Yuri, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today. And I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and your work. Where's the best place for them to go to do that?
First of all, thank you again for having me on. It's been a really wonderful conversation. Feel free to look me up on either of my 2 sites. There's yurikruman.com, YURIKRUMAN.com. That's more focused toward consulting and speaking. And my coaching site is masterthetalk.com, just as it sounds. And thank you again.
Yeah, we'll have it linked up in the show notes. Thank you, Yuri.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.